People love to repeat the same tired phrase as they age. It's too late. Too late to start something meaningful. Too late to learn something new. Too late to change your habits, your thinking, or your direction. But this idea that age closes doors is one of the most persistent and destructive lies people tell themselves. The truth is far more inconvenient for society's obsession with youth. Life after 60 isn't the end of possibility, it's the beginning of clarity. And clarity is far more potent than youthful energy. Most of what people call ambition in their 20s and 30s is really just noise. When you're young, the world throws options at you like confetti at a parade: careers, partners, hobbies, investments, beliefs, identities, dreams. And because you haven't lived long enough to understand the cost of distraction, you chase all of them at once. You mistake motion for progress. You think saying yes is how you grow. You think the world rewards the person who tries everything. Then decades pass, quietly accumulating their lessons. Mistakes compound just as reliably as interest. Regret shows up disguised as experience. And before you know it, the same person who once believed time was infinite now worries that they don't have enough. Left that moment, that painful, honest realization is what gives late life its sharpness. Clarity is earned, and people don't earn it until they've lived long enough to see exactly how much of their earlier life was wasted on noise. That is why most people don't become wise at 20 or 30 or even 40. They haven't lived long enough to understand what actually matters. So if you're 60 or older, don't believe the nonsense that says you're too late for anything. You're not. What you are is less stupid than you used to be, and if you use that properly, it's one of the greatest competitive edges you will ever have. The great advantage of being 60, you finally see what was invisible at 30. When you're young, you think life is about accumulation. More friends, more experience, more possessions, more ideas, more everything. You chase abundance in every direction and assume that more options must automatically equal more fulfillment. But with age comes the unavoidable arithmetic of life. Every yes is a trade, and the currency is your time. When you're 20, you have enough time to waste some of it. When you're 30, you still believe you can outrun your own stupidity. But by 60, something changes. You see clearly that each decision has a cost, and the cost is no longer small. You've lived through enough outcomes to finally understand the difference between effort and effectiveness. You've watched enough people implode to see the patterns. You've suffered through enough of your own bad decisions to recognize that simply avoiding stupidity produces far better results than chasing brilliance. Most people never learn this. They keep thinking the next opportunity will save them. They keep imagining that one more hustle, one more deal, one more project will finally satisfy the gnawing craving for more. But after 60, you've earned the right to know better. You know that ambition isn't the problem, misdirected ambition is. You know that life's best returns don't come from complexity, but from reducing it. And most importantly, you finally see the subtle truth that young people are blind to. The smartest thing you can do at 60 isn't to add, it's to subtract. The power of subtraction, why less becomes more after 60. Subtraction sounds counterintuitive. Society teaches us to keep accumulating, to keep climbing, to never slow down. But subtraction is the quiet, rational wisdom that only shows its face once a person has lived long enough to understand the consequences of excess. In your earlier years, your biggest enemy is inexperience. But at 60, your biggest enemy is clutter, mental clutter, social clutter, emotional clutter, financial clutter. Clutter of any form extracts a toll. It drains energy, resources, and attention. And the older you get, the more expensive that drain becomes. People imagine that complexity is sophistication, but ask anyone who has lived long enough and they'll tell you the opposite. Complexity is chaos wearing a designer's suit. Simplify your life. Simplify your expectations. Simplify your finances. Simplify your relationships. At 60, your greatest asset isn't your ability to hustle. It's your ability to discern what isn't worth your time. The world worships busyness. It praises speed. It celebrates noise. But if you've reached age 60 with your sanity intact, you know those are traps. You already know the truth hidden beneath the glamour. Simplicity is the ultimate wealth. A simple portfolio compounds better than a frantic one. A simple lifestyle produces more peace than an extravagant one. A simple circle of trusted people is far more valuable than a crowd. A simple schedule creates more meaning than endless commitments. Simplicity isn't minimalism. It isn't austerity. It's clarity. It's the ability to differentiate between what adds value and what merely adds complication. After 60, complications become extremely expensive. The returns on joy, peace, and health matter far more than the returns on one more dollar. The late life superpower, the ability to say no. When you're young, saying yes feels like growth. It feels exciting. Every opportunity looks shiny from a distance. Every idea seems worth exploring. Every invitation feels like a doorway to something meaningful. But after enough decades, you begin to notice a pattern. Most disasters begin with a yes. You said yes to the wrong people, yes to the wrong impulses, yes to greed disguised as ambition, yes to stress disguised as responsibility, yes to exhaustion disguised as productivity, yes to obligations disguised as loyalty, yes to distractions disguised as opportunities. If you replay your biggest regrets, you'll notice that many of them can be traced back to an unnecessary yes at the wrong moment. Late life grants you the privilege of restraint. By 60, you've earned the right to be selective, but more importantly, you've earned the wisdom to know why selectivity matters. Every yes now has a cost, and the cost is irreversibly tied to your most precious asset. Time you will never get back. This is why saying no becomes not only a skill, but a form of self-preservation. Say no to envy, no to unnecessary complexity, no to stupid risks taken out of boredom, no to relationships that erode your energy, no to one last deal that promises excitement but delivers chaos, no to keeping up with people who don't even know what race they're running, no to anything that interrupts your peace, your compounding, or your clarity. The world misunderstands the discipline of no. It believes no is an obstacle to opportunity. But after 60, the opposite is true. No is what protects opportunity. No preserves your energy so you can invest it where it actually grows. No shields your mind from becoming a playground for other people's agendas. No creates space, and space is where wisdom lives. Every yes must earn its way past your no. If it doesn't, let it go. And here's the secret that only people over 60 truly understand. Peace of mind is far more valuable than new opportunities. Age is advantage, why experience outperforms speed. Late life doesn't reduce your value. It reveals it. You're not slower. You're more accurate. You're not less ambitious. You're more calibrated. You're not limited. You're focused. You're not outdated. You're seasoned. The world worships speed because speed is easy to measure. But speed rarely wins in the long run. In investing, the fastest trader often dies broke. In business, the fastest growing company often collapses first. In life, the people who chase excitement often self-destruct. The greatest investors, thinkers, and leaders aren't the fastest. They are the most consistent. And consistency is a luxury the young can't reliably access. But at 60, you can. Experience creates stability. Stability creates patience. Patience creates compounding. And compounding silently and steadily outperforms everything else. Your edge now isn't your energy. It's your memory. Your advantage isn't speed. It's your ability to recognize patterns. Your strength isn't adaptation. It's discernment. You've seen bubbles. You've seen arrogance masquerading as intelligence. You've watched confidence turn to recklessness and then to ruin. And because you've seen it all before, you no longer need to stick your hand on the stove to confirm it's hot. That is the power of age. You no longer confuse novelty with value. Why starting at 60 is not too late, it's perfectly timed. People believe success rewards the young. But that's only true for effort-heavy ventures. The deeper forms of success, stability, clarity, peace, wisdom, rationality, reward the seasoned. If you're 60 and not broke, congratulations. You've already beaten most of humanity. Your new mission is simple: don't screw it up. There is more risk in greed than in age. more risk in envy than in retirement, more risk in unnecessary action than in careful inaction, more risk in trying to be young than in being wise. The real tragedy of aging isn't decline, it's believing you're disqualified from new beginnings. You're not disqualified, you're upgraded. At 60, you're better equipped to learn with humility instead of ego, choose wisely instead of impulsively, invest patiently instead of emotionally, value peace over appearance, protect health instead of neglecting it, build relationships based on trust instead of convenience, make decisions rooted in clarity instead of noise. Your younger self had stamina but no compass. Your older self has a compass even if the stamina fluctuates. You can start careers, habits, businesses, friendships, interests, or transformations at 60 that you could never have started properly at 30 because you were too blind to your own ignorance. Late life isn't a downgrade, it's an upgrade with fewer illusions. The gift of clarity, what life finally teaches you after 6 decades. By 60, the masks fall off, the illusions fade, the fog lifts. Life reveals itself not as a race, not as a performance, not as a competition, but as something far simpler, a filtering process. You start to recognize what truly matters. Peace over prestige, meaning over momentum, health over hustle, depth over display, stillness over stimulation, rationality over excitement. You realize that all the running you did earlier wasn't necessary. You realize the world never cared about your scoreboard. You realize your self-worth was never supposed to come from comparison. You realize the quiet life wasn't a consolation prize. It was the prize you were too naive to notice. Clarity is the final reward for surviving your own stupidity long enough to grow out of it. And once you have clarity, you understand why starting something meaningful at 60 isn't ridiculous. It's ideal. You start from knowing yourself instead of guessing. You start from understanding the cost of mistakes. You start from a place of emotional maturity. You start from a deeper sense of purpose. You start from having seen enough outcomes to know which path is nonsense. You start from a level of honesty you didn't have before. Your younger years were rehearsal. Your 60s and beyond are the real performance. The final truth about age and possibility. People fear age because they misunderstand it. Age doesn't remove anything essential. It removes illusions, and illusions are heavy. At 60, you're lighter than ever. Lighter because you don't have to impress anyone. Lighter because you no longer need permission to live rationally. Lighter because you know what drains you and what nourishes you. Lighter because you've pruned the nonsense from your values. Lighter because clarity allows you to move without confusion. So the correct question isn't, is it too late to start? The correct question is, what can I finally start now that I'm no longer distracted? Starting at 60 isn't late. Starting without illusions is perfectly on time. There comes a point in life, usually somewhere after 50, and almost always by 60, when you begin to see that the great triumphs of adulthood have less to do with brilliance and more to do with the slow, stubborn, unglamorous refusal to do stupid things. People imagine that success is built on big wins. In reality, success is built on avoiding big losses. That's true in investing, it's true in relationships, it's true in health, and it's especially true in the later decades of life, when your mistakes carry more weight and your time carries more value. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they cannot stop making bad decisions. The tragedy is that most of those bad decisions spring not from malice or ignorance, but from restlessness, an inability to sit still, a compulsive need to tinker, a craving for excitement disguised as ambition. But as you age, you start to understand that part of maturity is learning to leave well enough alone. This is the great paradox of compounding. It works best when you interfere the least. In youth, that idea feels counterintuitive. Every instinct tells you to push harder, to try more, to tweak, to adjust, to leap, to evolve. The world rewards energy and punishes stillness. But then decades pass, experience accrues, and slowly you realize something that the young cannot appreciate. Time is doing the heavy lifting, not you. Your job is simply to avoid interrupting it with unnecessary stupidity, and yet people interrupt compounding constantly. Not because they're foolish, but because they misunderstand the nature of progress. They think progress looks like action, but real progress, the kind that accumulates meaningfully over years, often looks like silence. It looks like patience. It looks like restraint. It looks like the discipline of not touching something just because your ego wants to feel involved. This is why simplicity becomes not only a preference in later life, but a necessity. Older minds grow sharper, but also more selective. At 60, you no longer have the bandwidth to entertain complexity for complexity's sake. And the more life you've lived, the more you realize complexity is where mistakes hide. It's where fear hides. It's where ego hides. And it's where compounding goes to die. The elegance of simple systems. There is a beauty to simplicity that only reveals itself after years of wrestling with complexity. You begin to notice patterns that were invisible before. Simple investments outperform clever ones more often than not. Simple routines create better health than elaborate programs. Simple relationships last longer than intense, dramatic ones. Simple goals are clearer and easier to sustain than ambitious fantasies. Simple truths, revisited often, produce more wisdom than obscure theories. Life, when observed carefully, shows that simplicity is actually sophistication in disguise. Young people interpret simplicity as a lack of ambition. They mistakenly believe complexity signals intelligence. They think a complicated portfolio must outperform a simple one. They think a dramatic lifestyle must be a meaningful one. They think more moving parts means more opportunity. But after enough mistakes and everyone makes them, the illusion breaks. Complexity reveals its real nature, a tangle of hidden risks, a labyrinth where clarity suffocates, a playground for ego. By 60, you've seen enough hidden traps to know the truth. The world is filled with people who complicate their lives and call it progress. But the wise simplify their lives and call it peace. Simplicity isn't laziness, it isn't avoidance. It's the courage to choose clarity when confusion is fashionable, the humility to admit you don't need more, and the discernment to recognize that the best systems are the ones you don't have to think about every day. The older you get, the more your aim shifts from expansion to elegance. You begin to prune instead of pursue. You refine instead of ADD. You remove instead of acquire. You focus on essentials because time has taught you what is essential. In this sense, late life becomes a kind of spiritual engineering. Simplify the structure so the system can run efficiently with minimal friction. The first rule of compounding: don't interrupt it. Compounding is one of the simplest concepts humans have ever discovered, yet it remains one of the hardest for humans to follow. Why? Because compounding demands patience, and patience demands maturity. The young want speed. The old appreciate time. The young want action. The old value stability. The young want excitement. The old prefer understanding. Compounding rewards the latter far more than the former. It does not care about your enthusiasm. It does not respond to your ambition. It does not bend to your will. It simply accumulates quietly in the background if you're disciplined enough to leave it undisturbed. But people interrupt it anyway, constantly. They chase the next big investment, the new opportunity, the sudden windfall, the fresh thrill. They switch strategies, they switch relationships, they switch priorities, they redecorate their lives with motion because sitting still makes them uncomfortable. And then suddenly they're 60, and it dawns on them the things they manipulated the most are the things that grew the least. But the things they left alone, the long friendships, the steady investments, the consistent habits, the durable character traits, the lifelong commitments, those are the things that blossomed. If there is one thing every older person learns, it is this: compounding works best when you stop touching it. The hardest part of compounding is resisting the urge to interfere. The second hardest part is resisting the urge to quit. And the third is resisting the illusion that you need more motion to feel alive. But to the disciplined mind, compounding becomes the most powerful force available. It builds wealth without noise. It builds character without applause. It builds relationships without drama. It builds wisdom without theatrics. It builds health without miracles. In a world obsessed with hacks and shortcuts, compounding is the quiet, stubborn force that ignores the noise and rewards the patient. And after 60, patience becomes one of your greatest strengths if you allow it to be. Why avoiding stupidity beats chasing intelligence. Charlie Munger used to say that it's far easier to avoid stupidity than to seek brilliance. People laugh at that line, thinking it's a joke. It isn't. It's one of the deepest truths ever uttered. The world contains far more ways to lose than to win, and the more complicated something is, the easier it is to lose without realizing it. This is why the practice of subtracting stupidity is more effective than the pursuit of genius. Think of all the disasters you've witnessed in others or in yourself over 60 years of life. Almost none came from insufficient genius. Most came from one of these predictable culprits: greed, envy, impatience, arrogance, impulsiveness, overconfidence, chasing excitement, ignoring risk, following crowds, taking shortcuts, emotional decisions. You didn't need a PhD to avoid these traps. You only needed discipline. You only needed humility. You only needed a bit of perspective, something that compounding itself gives you. If you stick around long enough, you start to notice that most mistakes are remarkably avoidable. Most catastrophes announce themselves with obvious symptoms. Most once-in-a-lifetime opportunities look suspiciously like the same traps you've fallen for before. After 60, stupidity becomes your greatest enemy, but it also becomes your easiest opponent, because you can finally see it clearly. You've encountered stupidity enough times to recognize its voice long before it speaks. You know the patterns, you know the stories, you know the consequences. Avoiding stupidity becomes not only possible but efficient. It preserves your time, your sanity, and your peace. It keeps you from making new mistakes while still allowing old lessons to age into wisdom. And here's the beauty. Avoiding stupidity compounds just as reliably as money. Each time you avoid an unnecessary problem, you free resources for something better. Each time you say no to a stupid impulse, you say yes to a better outcome. Each time you choose restraint over chaos, your life becomes a little more stable, and stability is the foundation of compounding. The danger of one last deal. There is a special kind of tragedy that affects people over 60, the one last deal syndrome. You've seen it. You may have lived through it. It's the impulse that whispers, "Just one more opportunity before I slow down. One more investment to secure everything. One more risk to feel alive. One more win before retirement." This is the devil wearing the mask of ambition. It preys on the ego. It feeds on the fear of irrelevance. It thrives on the illusion that excitement equals vitality. And it destroys more older adults than any market crash ever could. The truth is painfully simple. If you're over 60, you don't need one more deal. You need fewer problems. It's not your net worth that determines your security. It's your temperament. It's your rationality. It's the stability of your choices. It's the absence of chaos. It's the reduction of liability. The older you get, the less room you have for recovery. A mistake at 60 is far more expensive than a mistake at 30. Not because the world changes, but because you have changed. Your resilience is different. Your timeline is different. Your priorities are different. There is no shame in becoming more cautious with age. Caution is not fear. Caution is respect for reality. And reality is wonderfully clear after 60. Your job is no longer to get rich. It's to stay rich. One last deal is where fortunes die. One last gamble is where health collapses. One last ambition is where peace evaporates. The purpose of later life is not excitement. It's preservation, clarity, and contentment. If you need excitement, go climb a hill, take up a hobby, or travel somewhere interesting. But don't seek it in investments. The markets don't care about your age, but they do punish greed relentlessly. especially late-life greed, the virtue of quiet decisions. The more I've studied people across decades, the more I see a clear pattern. The loudest decisions are often the worst ones. Huge investments, dramatic commitments, sudden life changes, enthusiastic declarations, these rarely age well. The decisions that survive time tend to share one trait. They were made quietly. Quietly means without ego. Quietly means without pressure. Quietly means without the intoxication of emotion. Quietly means without the audience. Quietly means without the need to prove anything. The quiet decisions compound. The loud ones explode. By 60%, you should have a strong preference for the quiet ones. These decisions protect you. They align with your long-term interests rather than your momentary impulses. They simplify your life instead of complicating it. Quiet decisions include choosing investments you can hold without anxiety, choosing relationships without drama, choosing routines that don't exhaust you, choosing priorities that nourish your mind, choosing goals that align with who you are, not who you were, choosing actions that build stability rather than noise. The older you get, the more you understand that noise is a tax on intelligence, and most people pay this tax willingly because they mistake noise for vitality. But the wise don't. The wise know that quiet choices accumulate into a meaningful life, one that compounds in peace instead of tension. The mature relationship with action. Action is one of the most misunderstood concepts in modern life. People treat action as inherently noble, as if doing more is always good. But action without clarity is chaos. Action without discipline is destruction. Action without purpose is simply an escape from stillness. Younger people cling to action because they fear what silence might reveal about their direction. But at 60, you no longer need that illusion. You understand that action is only valuable when it produces outcomes worth the cost. The wise person acts selectively, not constantly, not compulsively, not emotionally. They act when the odds are heavily in their favor, and they stay still when they are not. This is why older minds make fewer but better decisions. Not because they are slower, but because they are more precise. Your goal now is not frantic action. It is intentional action, action that compounds, action that simplifies, action that aligns with the slow accumulation of peace, not the fast accumulation of stress. Simplicity is a late-life strategy. Simplicity is not a trend. It is not a style. It is not a reaction to chaos. It is a strategy, one of the most effective strategies available to a person over 60. Here is what simplicity gives you: fewer mistakes, fewer regrets, more clarity, more peace, better compounding, lower stress, higher resilience, more control, less wasted time, greater emotional stability. Simplicity amplifies compounding because complexity interrupts it. Simplicity amplifies peace because noise disrupts it. Simplicity amplifies clarity because clutter obscures it. Simplicity amplifies discipline because chaos weakens it. Everything you want at 60: peace, stability, health, meaning, connection, wisdom is downstream of simplicity. Everything you fear, chaos, regret, stupidity, unnecessary risk, is downstream of complexity. So what should you do? Prune, edit, subtract, simplify. Not because you are aging, but because you are finally wise enough to see the value in it, the real reward of avoiding stupidity. Young people chase brilliance. Older people chase sanity. And sanity, ironically, is what produces the most brilliant outcomes over decades. Avoid stupidity long enough, and your life becomes a clean runway for compounding: financial, emotional, intellectual, and relational compounding. By 60%, this is the compounding that matters most. The real reward of avoiding stupidity is not wealth. It's not reputation. It's not safety. It's peace. It's clarity. It's freedom. Avoiding stupidity clears the path for the things that actually matter. And late in life, clarity is not just an advantage, it's a survival mechanism.